Okay, hello everybody. I hope you're all doing good in this difficult time. We are here with you today with another NACE BC Student Section interviews with industry professionals. It's our pleasure to have with us Mr. Toby Stedham, Director of Operations at Carbon Engineering. Thank you very much for your time today. Anything to say before we start?
Yeah, thank you, Mo, for the invite, and thanks for having me on to talk to you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, the first question, what is your story? Please give us a brief biography of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the UK, and I studied for a master's in aerospace engineering and astronautics in Southampton in the UK. And then after I finished my studies, I went joined the Royal Air Force and spent 9 years in the Air Force as an aircraft engineer. So throughout that time, I was lucky enough to be working in a range of areas across bomb disposal, battlefield helicopter operations, VIP transport aircraft, and armaments engineering. After 9 years, I decided it was time for a bit of a change and left the Air Force. And spent a short bit of time contracted back to the Ministry of Defence as working in defence procurement. But I'd spent a little bit of time out in Canada in my student days and done a couple of ski seasons, and I knew that I wanted to move out to Canada and live out here. So moved out to Canada in mid-2017 and took a year out living in the Rockies in Banff, just enjoying mountain life, skiing and climbing and hiking. And then moved out to the West Coast, out to Vancouver in 2018. And I actually stumbled across Carbon Engineering in a BBC News article, and it looked pretty exciting. And I thought I'm interested to get involved with this project. And I was lucky enough to join the company in July 2018 as a project engineer. And then I've been in my current role since the start of 2019, so coming up 2 years now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so how do you foresee the future of the industry that you are working in? Will it be going to become different in, say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, so I think it's an exciting industry that's growing fast, and I can see that that's going to continue to be the case over the next 10 years. So we're seeing the Paris Climate Agreement and various countries starting to put in place carbon credit schemes or increased requirements for reducing emissions. And we're also seeing a lot of companies actually taking a lead in terms of social responsibility, and a lot of companies stepping up and saying that they're going to voluntarily decarbonize ahead of the regulations changing. So, I see a lot of growth in this industry, and I can see it being a very exciting space to be in over the next 10 years. So we're seeing a lot of interest from a range of people that are interested, from government organizations all the way through to commercial organizations as well. And I think alongside the carbon capture industry that I'm specifically working in, I think we talk a lot about sequestration of carbon, but also I think there's going to be a boom in the industry for carbon to products. So one of the options that we're exploring is carbon dioxide to fuel. But there are a range of other options out there as well. So, I think there's going to be a lot of growth in this area.
That's right. That's great. Okay, so there might be new interests to move to green energy resources. How do you think it may affect the status quo? Will it put a limit on the funding and opportunities for the oil industry, for example?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting question. We're seeing that renewable energy is decreasing in cost, through sources such as wind, solar, and I think small nuclear operations are becoming more viable as well. We're also seeing a lot of increase in the popularity of electric vehicles as well, so a lot more electric cars on the road. But there are certain areas that are really hard to decarbonize. So shipping and aviation are one of them. The cost and the complexity with decarbonizing those industries is huge. So I think there's going to be a balanced approach there. So, I think potentially you could see a bit of a decrease in the oil and gas industry. I think, certainly for the near future, there's still going to be a need and a reliance on those industries. But alongside that, I think there's a huge growth opportunity in renewables and green energy. I think oil's traditionally been quite boom and bust. When the good times are here, it's really good, and then when the not so good times are here, you get a lot of layoffs. But I think renewables is perhaps less boom and bust, but maybe a bit more steady and steady increase over the coming decades.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's right. So let's start some job-related questions. Okay. Is it a good idea to start my career with joining a startup company?
Yeah. So I think that really depends on what you're looking for. And I think, startups can be smaller, more intimate, more like a family. You spend a lot of time together in and out of work, pushing towards a common goal. And one of the great things about being at Carbon Engineering is that we have a great group of people that are really passionate about the company's goals and driving towards that goal. So it's really exciting to be part of a group of people that actually want to come to work and want to work on something rather than just trying to get through their 40-hour week and for it to be the weekend again. I think with the growth of the company, there can be opportunities for and responsibilities available to fairly young people that may not be available in a large, well-established company. So if a startup is growing rapidly, people that have been there, will perhaps have those opportunities earlier than they might in a large established company. And on the other hand, it can be chaotic and often changing while you're looking for market traction. But I find that highly exciting and interesting. So if you've got that mindset, I think it's definitely something that could be appealing. The other thing I'd say is with a startup company, the risk is definitely higher because, you don't have an established revenue stream in the early days. So, what I'd say is perhaps that's not so much of an issue for if you're starting out in your career, you have fewer commitments, you maybe don't have a family or a mortgage or car payments or whatever else, while you're young and still have fewer commitments, that high risk maybe isn't so much of an issue, whereas you're a bit further on in your career, you've got a family to support, you may think twice about joining a higher risk venture versus a well-established operation.
That's right.
But certainly it's something that I've really enjoyed, the challenge, the excitement, and I thrive on that environment.
Exactly, that's right. Given the new circumstances, do you think there will be a shift towards the skills for new applicants for job vacancies? For example, some skills that could be best achieved in academia?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things here. So definitely a lot of industries have seen increased working from home. So, certainly a good internet connection, the ability to focus and work remotely rather than in person. Being able to think independently, take the initiative, synthesize information and form your own considered opinion and conclusion. You may find that you have less direct interaction with colleagues than you may otherwise have done. I think it's also really important, working from home under the current circumstances, and I think it's going to continue for a while. Discipline is really important. Self-discipline, not being distracted by everything that's lying around at home. But also I'd say, given the current employment market and potentially the challenges, I think you're asking specifically about academia. It may be worth considering staying at university for further study. It's certainly not advice, but I'd suggest that it may be worth considering if that's something that you're interested in, and maybe another year or two at university, getting some additional education under your belt. In a year or two's time, the employment market may be a little more favorable.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Okay. Just one interesting question. What are your recommendations for students who do not meet some of the qualifications on the job postings, such as previous work experience? How do you get your foot in the door when most of the job postings ask for a minimal number of years of work experience. For example, more than 3 years for the most junior positions.
Yeah, and this is this is always challenging to kind of know when you should apply, or is it a valuable use of your time. But what I'd say is that job posting that's put together by the company is aspirational. So that's the company's perfect candidate, that if we could create the perfect person for this role, these are all the skills, this is all the experience that we are looking for. There's no guarantee that you're going to get an applicant that has all of that experience and all of those skills. So I'd bear that in mind, and sometimes you got to back yourself and believe in yourself, and even if you don't meet those minimum requirements, why shouldn't you apply? And so there's definitely been occasions where, when we've struggled perhaps with some of the skills or experience that we're looking for, we've taken on a candidate that has maybe not quite hit the bar that we were looking for. But what's really important in those circumstances is having a really positive attitude and a good attitude towards, maybe you're not quite the aspirational candidate, but if you can show that you'll work hard to fill any gaps or make up any shortcomings against that job posting, that attitude can be as valuable as experience.
That's right. That's an interesting point. Thanks for sharing that. What qualifications you are looking for in an employee?
So it really depends what the role is. So here at Carbon Engineering, we have a range of positions across operations team that I work with. We have an engineering team, an R&D team, and then we have other support teams as well, such as admin and logistics and purchasing, and then we have a growing project management team as well. So it really depends what level the role is. Some roles we take applicants from high school grads, whereas other roles that are perhaps more technically focused and R&D focused, we're potentially looking for people with a PhD. So it really depends on the role that you're applying for.
Oh, that's right. So some questions on the networking. Given that networking and career fairs are not possible during COVID-19, how would you recommend the students to go about approaching industries for job opportunities?
Yeah, so I'd say networking potentially is more challenging because those face-to-face opportunities are definitely restricted, but there are still ways to network, and so I'd suggest reaching out to leaders and recruiters via LinkedIn, and that's how you reached out to me. What I'd say there is a lot of people are very busy, so reach out to people via LinkedIn, be polite. If they don't respond, don't take it to heart. But reach out to a lot of people. If you reach out to 100 people, maybe one person will get back to you. Be polite, be flexible. If there's, I'm not sure what the availability generally of internships are currently in the current situation, but certainly internships, if there are opportunities for internships, can be a really good way of building a relationship with a company. And certainly a number of our more junior engineering staff, we developed a relationship with those staff during their interns, and so they were a known quantity. So we knew that when we were looking for a junior engineer, we already had 8 months experience working with that person, so we had a good understanding of their character and their output and their ability. Use everyone that you can think of. Get creative. Use school alumni, friends, family. Anyone that you can think of. So a piece of feedback from our HR team here and recruitment team is that something that makes a really good impression is when you're applying for jobs or trying to network, you may look at a company's website and say, there's not a job here that would be ideally suited to me. There's no problem with still reaching out to that company and saying, hey, I've already looked at your careers page. I'm aware that there's nothing specifically fitting my skill set right now, but here's what I have to offer, and I'd be super interested and super passionate about working for your company. So please, if something does become available, please keep me in mind. and then follow up every few months. Don't be pushy, but remind them that you're interested. And it's definitely happened on a couple of occasions where someone had reached out 6 months, a year ago. There was nothing for them at the time, and then we'll be looking for a position, and then they'll kind of ping us every couple of months, and while we're searching for this new position, we'll get a ping from them and be like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. He was these were his qualifications, and maybe he's suitable. So let's see if we can bring him in for an interview. So the other thing I'd say is be flexible and open to a range of opportunities. There may be restrictions right now in the employment market, so you may not be able to get your dream role, but be flexible and think about transferable skills. And the majority of my career was in the aviation industry before I came to CE. Whilst I don't have chemical engineering background, I have a lot of transferable skills that I brought from my career previously to Carbon Engineering. So yeah, it's tough, but I just say stay positive, keep trying, and get creative, and reach out to anyone that you can.
That's right. Okay, very good information. Thank you for sharing. Can we connect with the industry members on LinkedIn? So I think you kind of answered that question, but if you want to go further, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I just reiterate, I get a lot of people reach out to me, and I try and respond to as many as I can. I don't always manage to get around to everyone, but I definitely say don't be afraid to reach out to people on LinkedIn, and just make sure, and don't be afraid to follow up. If it's been a couple of weeks and they haven't got back to you, but just make sure you stay polite, and you kind of don't get pushy or frustrated if you don't get a response. Move on to the next person.
That's right. And the next question: how to network without being annoying or disrespectful of their time?
Yeah, so I think this kind of this touches on what we've just been discussing, but yeah, like I said, don't be afraid to reach out. Recognize that people are busy, be respectful, and be polite and follow up. So remain gracious, because even if there's not an opportunity now, if you're polite and if you show a good attitude and and you're respectful in your communications, it may be that 6 months down the line or whenever an opportunity does become available, and if you've had some positive interactions with those people while you're networking, then you'll stick in their mind, and they might recall, oh yeah, I was talking to this person 6 months ago, and maybe they'll be suitable for this role, so I'll reach out and connect with them.
That's right. Okay, so some good questions from graduate students. How can a graduate student best present his or her research experience in order to be considered for an industrial technical position? What kind of doors can a master's or PhD open up in industry?
Yeah, so I think this one can be a challenging task with your resume, because generally, often the first step will be that your resume will be pre-screened by the HR department or by the recruitment department. So if you go into crazy amounts of technical detail and technical language, then the likelihood is that they're not technical specialists, and they're not going to understand it. So you need to find a balance so that you're clearly articulating your experience and your research that can be understood by a non-specialist. But also, it goes far enough so that a technical reader at the second stage, if it gets passed on to the hiring manager or the person that's recruiting for that position, they can dive a little bit deeper. So one thing that we use, so we'll kind of read a little bit into people's research and academic background as part of our screening process, but for specialized positions, what we'll often do is a technical work sample or a technical problem that we'll then forward to the candidate for them to work through and present a solution. So that'll be an opportunity for them to draw out some of their research background and present it during the interview. Mm-hmm. In terms of what kind of doors can a master's or PhD open up in the industry, so I think it can definitely help you go further in your career. So if you have a master's or a PhD, you can't necessarily expect to walk into an advanced position. You know, that additional education is great. It gives you a really good grounding and a really good background, but you still need to develop some experience. So, you know, what I'd say is if you have a PhD or a master's, you know, you may still find yourself going into an entry-level position, because you need to get that base experience of working in a professional environment. But because you have that additional level of education, you know, that will then help you go further in your career once you've got that kind of basic experience, and got a couple of years under your belt.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Another interesting question: is having a PhD an advantage or disadvantage for finding a job in the industry?
So again, it kind of depends. It's definitely an advantage for the appropriate position. So some of our senior technical hiring, you know, will specify a master's or a PhD either as a requirement or as a strong preference, you know, for someone going into an advanced engineering or a research and development role. But as I mentioned before, that, you know, a PhD doesn't necessarily take the place of experience. So you know, you still need to accept that you're likely going to start off in a more junior position, but it could unlock more opportunities further down the road. And like I say, it really depends on the type of role that you're applying for.
That's right. What would you do to help your future career if you go back to your undergraduate or graduate degree?
Yeah, so with the industry I'm in now, what I would say is if I went back to my undergraduate degree, I'd probably study chemical engineering rather than aerospace engineering. But I think equally that's the beauty, you know, of working in an environment such as this, is that, okay, I don't necessarily have that same chemical engineering experience as many other people on the team, but I can bring a different perspective based on my experiences, you know. And I think it's important not to focus on what you don't have, and it's important to focus on what perspective and skills you can bring to the table, you know. So what's transferable, even if you don't have the exact education, or even if you don't have the exact direct experience, you know, I'm sure there's things in your background that you can draw upon, that's transferable, and even, you know, even potentially you can bring a perspective that is a bit different from the perspective that everyone else around the table brings. So that can be complementary. So we've got people from a range of different industries that, you know, that all bring something. You know, we've got people from the railroad industry. We've got people from that have worked on race car teams before. You know, myself, my background's aerospace, and there's a whole range of experience on the team. So you know, like I said, I wouldn't focus on what you're missing, but just focus on how you can maximize what you have and how you can make it relevant to a new position.
That's right. Another question about COVID-19 effects. Will there be more competition after COVID-19, since there is a backlog of hiring and a wave of new graduates?
Yeah, so I think logic would say yes, probably. You know, many industries are struggling, and I think the unemployment rate, you know, has increased during COVID. So likely there will be more people applying for fewer jobs. However, you know, there are industries that are thriving. There are industries that are doing well, and life needs to go on. So, you know, I think the initial wave of COVID, maybe a lot of recruitment was put on hold, either temporarily or permanently. But the longer we work through this, you know, we have to find ways of going on. You know, so a lot of companies in the tech industry are doing very well currently. So what I'd suggest is try and identify the industries that are performing strongly, you know, and maybe target your applications there. And, you know, for carbon engineering, we've actually maintained pace of recruitment throughout COVID. So, you know, we've not really held off on our recruitment. We're still pushing forward. So there's definitely industries there that are growing. There's definitely industries there that will be recruiting. So try and identify those industries and target your applications there.
Okay, nice. What suggestions you can give for new graduates without industry working experience, how to help them get the first job?
Yeah, so we've kind of talked a little bit about internships and networking. So, internships can be really valuable if they're available to help build a relationship with a company. Network hard, use anyone and everyone you can think of, parents, friends, teachers, alumni. I'd suggest joining a professional organization. Obviously, your members will all have done that. And, I know, for example, the EGBC website has a careers page, and, I would assume that, your organization has a careers page and networking events as well. So that can be a good way of identifying opportunities. Apply far and wide. It can be a bit demoralizing submitting application after application after application, but you need to be dedicated and dedicate the time to do that. You can't just apply to 1 or 2 jobs and expect that you're going to get your dream job first time round. It can be hard, and it can take many applications. Tailor your resume every time. Submit a covering letter every time. It can be very clear when you submit a generic resume or a generic covering letter. Your covering letter can add in a little bit more color that's not there on your resume, and you can tailor it specific to the company. I'm passionate about working for your company, and this is why, and here's a little bit about me and why I'd be a great fit with your company. I think traditionally it could make a big difference dropping off your resume in person. I'm not so sure if that's advisable in the current situation. But other things that you can do, when you have submitted a resume, if it's by email or if it's through a website, call or email the HR department to follow up. Demonstrate how passionate you are about that role and about working for that company. Don't just fire in your application and forget and move on and hope that you'll get a call. Follow up and let them know that you really are genuinely interested. There are people that we had previously discounted for certain roles because maybe the skill set didn't match up or the background didn't quite match up for what we're looking for. But because of the number of times that they followed up and they demonstrated that they really do want to work here, that's led to an interview. So as long as it's done respectfully, and as long as it's not kind of 5 times a day, so you're hassling people, if it's done respectfully and appropriately, that can really help. Also, you may not be able to go straight into your ideal job, so like we've talked about, transferable skills. See if you can find a job that has transferable skills, where you're still developing experience, even if it isn't direct experience to where you want to end up. You can be building experience, and you can start trying to align yourself with where you want to go next, and figuring out a path to get there. Yeah,
that's right. Thank you for sharing that information. Okay, so we've reached to the last question. Please give graduate and undergraduate engineering students some general advice as final words.
Sure. So I'd suggest when you're applying, make sure you thoroughly research the company. So one of the interview questions that I ask generally, pretty often is, what can you tell me about our process? And, and that will, find out if someone's taken the time to actually do a bit of research into the company and into the process. Attitude is another one that's really key. We've seen excellent resumes that don't translate into good interviews. And likewise, we've seen resumes that we're a bit lukewarm on. But then when we've interviewed the person, because of their attitude, because of their passion, because of their drive, because of their desire to learn and develop and be part of the team and part of the journey, that's kind of made up for some of the perhaps gaps in their resume and their experience. I think it can be hard, and it can take a long time. I remember back to when I first moved to Vancouver, and I applied to what felt like hundreds of jobs, and I had very few responses. So it can be easy to get demoralized at times, and it can be easy to get down and feel like there's no end or no light at the end of the tunnel. But keep the faith and keep pushing, keep going with your applications. Yeah, and then I think the final thing is, as I mentioned previously, that during the first wave, a lot of recruitment was put on hold or cancelled. But whether COVID stays around or whether we get through it, life needs to go on. And it may be a tougher market, but companies will still have to hire people, and recruitment still needs to go on. You know, so there is some light at the end of the tunnel there, and, you know, companies will be hiring. You know, and I think the final thing I'd say is, you know, just good luck to the people that are out there, the new graduates that are going to be looking for jobs and going through that process.
Thank you so much for your good advice and good information shared in this interview. I just want to say thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your valuable time and joining us in this interview. Have a great day.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very much for the invite, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, good luck to all of your students and your colleagues in finding employment over the coming months.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.